July 3, 1884, Aurora Daily Express, Aurora, Illinois. Wiggins' Dark Moon. The weather prophet's conception of the Earth's second satellite. The failure of his best predicted storms explained on a plausible theory. A grand idea. New York Tribune. In the news columns recently appeared the announcement by Mr. Wiggins of one of the most intrepid astronomical discoveries ever invented. The conception of this dark second satellite of the Earth does honor to the tenacity with which Mr. Wiggins adheres to his favorite theories. He has for several years been making meteorological predictions, which for the most part have somehow failed to connect. Under such circumstances, an ordinary theorist would have begun to suspect that his premises might be wrong. But it is at this point that true genius differentiates itself, so to speak, and soars above the common herd. Mr. Wiggins never suspects his premises for a moment. What he does is to imitate Canning. The latter called into existence of the New World to redress the balance of the Old. Mr. Wiggins calls into existence a dark moon to redress the balance of his meteorological predictions. It is really quite a grand idea. When Leverrier discovered Neptune, he was induced to look for it by observing perturbations in the motions of another planet. Mr. Wiggins, however, postulates a second moon merely upon the existence of discrepancies in his storm warnings. He says to himself, "It is evident from the failure of my predictions that something is wrong with the solar system, if not with the cosmos. And since the failure of my predictions is inexplicable on any theory which presupposes my knowledge of what I am talking about, and since it is impossible to discard that assumption so far as I am concerned, it becomes necessary to invent a dark moon, the invisibility of which may account for its never having been discovered, while its mere existence as a satellite of the Earth will explain the apparent failure of my best predicted storms to come to time." So said, so done, and here we have the dark moon, with all its dips, spurs, and angles, with all its appurtenances and paradidiments, as the lawyers say, calmly and confidingly offered to the public in Mr. Wiggins' most infallible style. It may at once be admitted that a dark moon is the only kind of a moon which could have served the purpose of Mr. Wiggins, for what he wants is a planetary body which can be relied upon to deflect storms, interfere with earthquakes, and generally protect Mr. Wiggins against the natural consequences of his own predictions, yet which will also elude the intrusive telescope, defy the analytical spectroscope, and, in short, baffle the most enterprising astronomers of the old school. There is, however, one quarter in which Mr. Wiggins may find countenance. The Theosophists hold that when men are hopelessly wicked, their souls are banished to a mysterious planet, which they say is near the Earth, yet is not the visible moon. May not the seed of Iveci prove to be the dark moon of Mr. Wiggins? By all means, let him try the Theosophists. They at least have no prejudices against the promulgation of theories which fly in the face of modern science, for they are in the same business themselves. November 22, 1922. The Gridley Herald, Gridley, Butte County, California. Is no longer golden orb. French scientist makes the assertion that the real color of the sun is blue. All the daylight comes from the sun, but it arrives here by different ways. The direct light, that which forms the solid rays, has grown weak by its passing through the atmosphere, slightly for the red light, more so for the blue. The diffused light of the sky, where the blue predominates, is made up of all that the direct radiation lacks. The blue of the sky is taken from the sun itself, and the result is that we do not see the royal star under its true color. If by some miracle, which science will perhaps realize, we could rise about 100 kilometers above the diffusing layers of the atmosphere, the solar disk would appear to us not white, but bluish, standing out in relief on a black sky where stars glitter at full noon. In this way, it would appear to the men in the moon if the moon were inhabited. And this vision of science perfectly agrees with what we know of the solar temperature. Physicists admit that the radiant surface, the photosphere, is not far from a temperature of 6,000 degrees Celsius. It is therefore hotter than the yellowish flame of our gas burners, than the white light of our electric lamps, and the electric arc itself, whose color is bluish. Now, it is known that the hotter a radiant body is, the richer it is in blue and violet. Therefore, the sun is blue. L. Houlevin in L'Étang, Paris. September 13, 1901, Carbon County Sentinel, Carbon County, Montana. End of the world may result from heat. This summer's excessive heat is explained by a Chicago scientist in a way calculated to give both chills and fever to that part of humanity which accepts his explanation. He asserts that the Earth in its annual revolution about the sun is approaching nearer and nearer to that orb every summer and getting farther and farther away every winter. The ultimate result, he avers, will be that the inhabitants of this sphere will be alternately baked and frozen until no living being is left. Professor Ludwig J. Marienberger, Ph.D., a graduate of the University of Berlin, who speaks 10 languages, is the exponent of this startling theory. Some scientists have argued that eventually this Earth would become a frozen mass, others that it would, in the course of a few thousand years, be transformed into an orbicular furnace, which in time would consume itself. Professor Marienberger says both of these contingencies are quite probable. The professor's idea is that this globe, in its orbital revolutions, has slipped a cog and that it will continue to slip into ever-changing orbits. He is of the opinion that the Earth is approaching old age, becoming somewhat decrepit and wobbly, and has not the amount of inherent magnetism to maintain itself in its proper channel. Solstices and the other demonstrations showing that nearness to the sun does not make this mundane sphere hotter or colder do not bother Professor Marienberger. Sunspots and similar phenomena are only incidental and can have little effect. A Chicago University professor ridicules the theory of Professor Marienberger.